The story begins with a search party looking for a missing couple who had vanished without a trace. Deep inside the forest, they stumbled upon a strange pit where a few dogs had accidentally fallen, unable to escape. The dogs eventually wandered into a nearby cave and drank from a pool inside. Back with the search party, one of the men managed to find the missing dogs, but something was wrong. They stood eerily still, staring at each other in an unsettling way. He decided to take them home, hoping they would settle down. Yet, their behavior didn't change. Soon after, one of the dogs began making disturbing human-like sounds. The man's son, disturbed by the dogs barking non-stop in the barn, called his father over. When they opened the door, the sight before them was horrifying. The two dogs had started merging together, their bodies twisting as if they were becoming one. The scene shifts to a young man named Tim, who was quietly looking through old family photos. His girlfriend, Millie, walked in and reminded him that everyone was waiting outside. It turned out they were hosting a farewell party, as the couple planned to move to the countryside to begin a new chapter in their lives. During the celebration, Millie surprised everyone by proposing to Tim. Caught completely off guard, he froze in shock, leaving her embarrassed in front of the guests.
Yes, of course, yes.
Though Tim eventually said yes, the moment felt painfully awkward. Later that night, Tim apologized for his reaction, insisting he never meant to embarrass her. But Millie couldn't shake her doubts, confessing that maybe their love wasn't as strong as she thought. She even suggested they separate before things became more difficult. Tim reassured her, insisting that their bond was still intact. As they lay down to sleep, Millie suddenly whispered about strange figures watching them. Tim glanced toward the door and saw a woman standing there, crying. He jolted awake, realizing it had only been a dream. Trying to clear his head, Tim went outside and found Millie arranging things for their move. Once they settled into their new apartment, Tim noticed a foul stench coming from upstairs. Tracing the smell, he climbed up and discovered a cluster of rotten rats tied together. To his shock, one of them was still alive. Though disturbed, he brushed it off and tried not to think about it. Meanwhile, Millie started her new job teaching elementary English, where she met Jaime, a friendly coworker. They quickly bonded, and Millie learned he lived in the apartment opposite theirs. That evening, Tim practiced music. He was an aspiring musician, spending his nights rehearsing before bed. The next morning, the couple went hiking around their new neighborhood. Along the way, they noticed a strange bell placed deep within the forest, seemingly meant to guide travelers along a hidden path. They wandered for hours, but when they tried to return, they realized they were lost. Tim checked his compass, but it didn't help. Just as he suggested moving forward, the ground gave way beneath him. Millie tried to pull him out, but instead they both fell into a cave below. Fortunately, neither of them was seriously hurt. Millie tried calling for help, but there was no signal. The atmosphere in the cave felt heavy, as though unseen figures surrounded them. With no escape, they decided to spend the night. Near the pool inside, Tim gave Millie the last of their bottled water before drinking directly from the strange water himself. As they sat together, Tim confessed that the smell of the dead rats reminded him of a painful memory from his childhood. He recalled walking in on his mother, who had broken down after his father's death, her mind unable to cope. That day left him scarred, and the stench of decay had haunted him ever since. As they drifted off to sleep, a shadowy presence emerged from the pool, creeping toward them. Tim awoke suddenly, hearing strange noises. To his horror, the vines above him seemed to mimic his breathing, while Millie gasped for air. Then he snapped awake again, realizing it had only been another nightmare. When they tried to move, they discovered their legs had fused together,
Slow.
stuck like they were glued. After struggling, they managed to separate, though their skin tore painfully in the process. Exhausted, they finally climbed out of the cave and made their way home. Later, Millie asked Tim to massage her shoulders, but in doing so, he grew restless and accidentally squeezed her too hard. Embarrassed, he apologized and stepped away to take a shower, while Millie drove to town for groceries. While alone, Tim suddenly collapsed in the bathroom. The farther Millie drove, the worse his strange episodes became. It was as if her every movement directly affected him, their bodies inexplicably connected. His head slammed against the tiles, but after a terrifying struggle, he regained consciousness. Fearing something was seriously wrong, he went to see a doctor. The doctor diagnosed him with stress from adjusting to a new environment, but also mentioned that another couple had mysteriously gone missing in the area months earlier. Back home, Tim began researching the missing couple when Millie returned. They shared a quiet moment, reflecting on life and how far they had come. Their conversation was interrupted by Jaime, who dropped by to welcome them properly. Over dinner, they recounted their terrifying cave experience. Jaime explained that the cave was once the site of a New Age chapel that had collapsed years ago, supposedly due to bad weather. That night, Tim and Millie shared a kiss, but something bizarre happened. Their lips seemed stuck together, and Millie accused him of biting her. Tim tried to explain the strange sensations he had been experiencing, but she brushed it off. Later, as they slept, Millie awoke to find Tim choking on her hair, unable to free himself. Panicked, she pulled desperately until he finally coughed it out, both of them staring at each other in horror. The next morning, Tim prepared to leave for a music gig, but Millie insisted he should rest after what had happened. He refused to cancel, so she drove him to the train station, telling him to stay out with his friends if needed. But as she drove farther away, Tim's episodes returned, worse than ever. His body shook violently, and visions overwhelmed him until he missed his train entirely. Unable to bear being apart from her, he dragged himself toward the school where Millie was teaching.
Millie rushed out in a panic, pulling Tim into a bathroom stall. What started as a desperate attempt to calm him down quickly turned into something far more intimate. But once again, their bodies betrayed them. They became stuck together, struggling in pain to separate. In the midst of their struggle, a student caught sight of them and ran off before they could notice.
Got to get out of here now.
Millie forced herself away from Tim, the painful separation leaving her shaken. The child who witnessed the scene informed Jaime, but he managed the situation discreetly and sent the kid back to class. When Millie and Tim returned home, Millie's frustration boiled over. She lashed out at Tim, furious at him for dragging her into such a humiliating situation. Their argument grew so heated that Millie stormed out and went straight to Jaime's home. There she opened up to him, apologizing for earlier and sharing her troubles with Tim. Jaime listened kindly, encouraging her not to give up on Tim, describing him as her true other half. Millie asked if Jaime lived alone, and he revealed that he once had a husband who had since passed away. He brought out a tape of his wedding, showing her a glimpse of his past. But as they watched, Millie suddenly noticed Tim peering through the window from outside, watching them silently. That night, a disturbing event unfolded. Millie's body seemed to float and move involuntarily, echoing Tim's own movements. When Tim opened the door and saw her in this state, he had to slap her awake. Shaken, the two sat down to talk. Tim tried to explain everything that had been happening since their time in the cave, but Millie dismissed his fears as absurd. When he suggested returning to the cave for answers, she refused and instead ended the relationship. As she walked away, a drop of her blood on the cable strangely slid closer toward Tim, as if pulled by an invisible force. That night, they chose to sleep in separate rooms. But not long after, Tim awoke, his body twisting unnaturally as he was dragged against his will toward Millie's room. When they finally touched, a wave of relief washed over them, but at the same time, their hands fused together in excruciating pain. Desperate, Millie reached for Tim's muscle relaxants, and together they swallowed as many as they could, hoping to stop their limbs from contorting. The effort left them exhausted, and soon they collapsed into unconsciousness. By morning, Tim woke up to find himself tied to a chair, their arms still fused. Millie, determined, handed him whiskey before taking a buzzsaw to cut their skin apart. After the painful separation, she decided to drive him to the hospital. But when she reached for her car keys, she realized she had left them at Jaime's house. She went to retrieve them while Tim returned to the cave in search of answers. At Jaime's home, Millie found no sign of him. Wandering inside, she came across a video playing of two men, one of whom looked eerily like Jaime, participating in a ritual where their bodies were fused together. At that moment, Jaime revealed himself, confessing that he was the product of that fusion, a living embodiment of two people becoming one. He insisted it was the start of something extraordinary. Meanwhile, inside the cave, Tim stumbled upon a horrifying sight. People fused into the walls, their bodies twisted beyond recognition. Among them were Carrie and Simon, now merged into a grotesque monstrosity. Horrified, Tim grabbed a knife and hacked at their fused fingers to escape.
Back at the house, Hyman explained that his cult's purpose was to unite people completely, merging their bodies and souls into a single being. He hoped for Tim and Millie to undergo the same transformation. To force it, he slashed Millie's wrist, but she struck back, hitting him hard enough that his body split into two separate people. Terrified, Millie fled back home. There, she found Tim preparing to harm himself, believing it was the only way to prevent them from becoming like the creatures he saw in the cave. But the force between them grew stronger, dragging them together again. As they clung to each other, Tim finally opened up, repeating Millie's words from the beginning of their journey and confessing how deeply he loved her. Millie, bleeding and weak, showed him her wrist wound and accepted what seemed like her fate. She collapsed in Tim's arms. In a final act of devotion, Tim carried her inside and fused his arm to hers to stop the bleeding. The process was long and agonizing. But eventually, the two fully merged into one. Later that evening, Millie's parents arrived for their regular Sunday dinner, but when the door opened, they were greeted not by Tim or Millie separately, but by a single figure, a person who bore the features of both, fused into one body. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more exciting and latest movie recaps.